The Australian Financial Review.
It all started with a panicked phone call. The politician had just got word that a solar panel factory in his hometown was about to be shut down. Desperate to save the local jobs, he rang a mate on the slim chance that he would buy it and save the jobs.
One of my friends in the city council called me in a state of bewilderment and said, well, they're going to scrap our nice factory. Wouldn't you like to have a look at it? The factory had already been wound down, and they were about to sell the machines as scrap metal. I think there were 2 people still working for the company.
That's incredible. They were going to sell the machines for scrap metal?
Yeah, obscene, huh? Obscene. Basically, we took over that company when it was really in shambles, about to be declared bankrupt.
The politician's mate? That was Robert Swanborne. It's now exactly 10 years since he bought that shambles of a factory with just 2 employees in the Dutch city of Arnhem. It now employs 55 people, and an expansion plan could take that up to 220 within a couple of years. Rombert is convinced the disruptive type of solar panels that come out of the factory can make solar power even more affordable on a mass scale and break China's stranglehold on the industry. And one very famous Australian billionaire wants to help him do it.
Hi, my name is Rombert Swanborne. I live in Arnhem in the Netherlands. I run a company called Hyatt Solar. We're producing Powerful. We strongly believe that Powerful will be the new solar PV technology in the near future.
Everyone knows we need to do something about climate change, but what's not clear is how do we fix it?
Low emissions technologies.
There is net zero modelling.
Change is coming whether you like it or not.
Change isn't just coming, it's already underway. We're living through a massive industrial revolution where just about everything we do is going to have to change in less than 3 decades. Empires are going to crumble and fortunes are going to be made. I'm Peter Kerr from the Carbon Challenge team at the Australian Financial Review, and this is Tech Zero. It's a podcast about the big green ideas that could get us to net zero and the inspiring people who are putting their heart and soul into making them work.
Check out all the solar panels. They're on every roof.
That's my producer Lap you can hear there. We were driving through Bacchus Marsh in Victoria on our way to meet a self-described mad scientist for one of the upcoming episodes of Tech Zero. We were both struck by how prolific the solar panels were through Bacchus Marsh. I guess it's the same in most Australian suburbs, but in modern, growing ones like Bacchus Marsh, it's really noticeable. They're just everywhere. Almost 3% of all the world's photovoltaic capacity has been invested in this country. On a per capita basis, we're number 1, and daylight is second, if you pardon the pun. It's a bit ironic, isn't it? A nation that's been incapable of electing governments that would take aggressive action on climate change has also been the world's most enthusiastic adopter of rooftop solar. But Rombert likes the idea that ordinary people take matters into their own hands.
We shouldn't rely there too much on our governments, and neither should it be their role, I think, to initiate these large changes. They should support it, but we shouldn't expect them to take the responsibility to drive these new ranges.
To be fair, Australian governments have played a role in our solar boom. Renewable energy targets and financial incentives at both state and federal level have undoubtedly stoked our love affair with rooftop solar. When the federal government pledged that Australia would get to net zero emissions by 2050, it listed a bunch of technologies that would get us there.
Technology will have the answers to a decarbonised economy, particularly over time.
You probably remember there was some banter at the time about the fact that some of these technologies didn't yet exist and we were just trusting that they would emerge.
The word plan doesn't constitute a plan, no matter how often you say it and what font it's printed in.
One of those technologies was ultra low-cost solar. This is the idea that the big reductions that we've seen in the cost of solar power over the past decade isn't enough. Solar power has to get cheaper if we're going to deploy it at scale. And that's more important than ever after a year in which solar panel prices went up for the first time in a long time. The prices went up on the back of supply disruptions in China and soaring metal prices. And China's domination of the silicon wafers that go into solar panels means that the rest of the world could be held hostage in future if China decided to ramp up prices. And that's where Rombot wants to make a difference. His factory in the Netherlands doesn't make the type of solar panels you typically see in Australia. You know, the rectangular ones in the metal frames that are on everyone's roofs. Rombot calls his product Powerfoil. It's a flexible solar panel that can be cut, wrapped or folded into any shape you like. To an Australian eye, it looks a bit like the red carpet they roll out at the Logies. Are the photovoltaic cells, are they in between the two sheets of polymer?
Exactly. So they're encapsulated between those two layers.
It's like a sandwich, I guess.
It is, exactly.
And so can the sun's rays go through the polymer? The polymer doesn't block any of the sun's rays?
No, you need to design that front sheet very carefully because any reflection of light or any absorption of light prevents that light coming to your photosensitive layer and will reduce the efficiency of the material. That transparency is very important.
And do you stick the two pieces of polymer together just with glue?
Yeah, very simple. It's a ridiculously simple manufacturing process. So you do it roll to roll and you've got these big laminator machines and they do quite a bit part of the work. Whereas in a normal glass panel PV factory, you've got quite some material handling. In our case, we just have a roll of 2 kilometers of material that runs through a machine, and that's it.
It almost sounds like your factory, if I were to walk around it, would look more like a textile factory, whereas the traditional solar panel factory might be like a metalworks.
Yeah, no, you're very true. And we use many of the same machines that textile factories use. It is not a new type of cell, but it's a different cell. So we use thin film silicon. And these layers are typically 100 times thinner than the crystalline silicon materials. So that's one of the big advantages. You need much less of the expensive material than you need in glass panels. And at the same time, because it's so much thinner, you have a flexible material as well. If you try to flex or bend photovoltaic cells in a glass panel, you'll break them. And these can be wound around a pencil.
Relying on a photovoltaic foil that's 100 times thinner than normal solar panels might be cheaper to produce, but it's also the source of Powerfoil's competitive disadvantage. Powerfoil tends to generate less power than the traditional panels when receiving the same amount of sunlight. Back when he bought the factory, Powerfoil tended to convert about 12% of the sunlight it received into power. That's less than the traditional panels. They typically convert about 18%. So yeah, a piece of Powerfoil put side by side with a traditional panel of the same size will generate less power.
Originally, the disadvantage of this technology was a lower efficiency. But one of the things we did in the past 10 years is embark on an ambitious technology roadmap. Now we are in a situation that we derive out of any given surface, we derive the same amount of power or more than a silicon glass panel, but at half the cost. So originally the disadvantage was that our costs were low, but we needed to have more surface. But that disadvantage has been eliminated as well.
Rombot chose his words carefully there when he said that Powerfoil can generate the same amount of power from any given surface. As we know, Powerfoil doesn't convert sunlight quite as efficiently as the traditional panels, but it can cover more of your roof. You can carpet your roof in the stuff. The same can't be said for the traditional panels. In places where land is at a premium, Powerfoil puts more of that land to work. The investment that Rombot has put into Powerfoil over the past decade has closed the gap on the competition with regards to sunlight conversion. Powerfoil is now getting up towards 15% efficiency, compared to 18% from traditional panels.
The market was thinking this product would only be suited because it's a flexible, lightweight solar PV that this product would only be suited for very high value applications, put it on buildings with curved roofs and that kind of stuff. Whereas our light bulb moment was that it's really a low cost product, and we developed into a low cost product. We are currently already at half the price of Chinese, or basically the traditional crystalline silicon panels that predominantly come from China. But here we have a product that is produced in Western Europe. It's all roll-to-roll, cheap raw materials. So we have an enormous cost advantage now. What we actually see is that this product is quite of interest to many developing economies, especially because 95% of the raw materials required for the production can be sourced within the country itself. So the local content of the product is very high. And that is in contrast to crystalline silicon panels, where quite often the wafers need to be imported predominantly from China, and where a large part of the value of the product is still being imported from abroad. And last but not least, it's aesthetically very pleasing. You get uninterrupted surfaces. You don't have any walkways. You can walk over it. So generally, people find it very pleasing to the eye as well.
Did you say you can walk on it?
Yep.
Oh, wow.
Shouldn't wear high heels, but...
Did you discover that the hard way?
No comment.
At his factory in the Netherlands, Rombert's team can produce about 10,000 square metres of Powerfoil a year, and that is not much. It's barely enough to cover half of the grass surface at the MCG. That much Powerfoil can generate about 1 megawatt of energy, which is roughly how much my 4-bedroom home in Melbourne consumed in the 3 months of last summer.
It's a very small production volume, but basically in the expansion phase where we're now, we will reach 40 megawatt in 6 months from now. That's the first stage of the expansion. And then 300 megawatt 2 years later. And in Australia, we're looking at a 1 gigawatt factory.
And so the 300 megawatts, is that all going to be at Arnhem?
300 megawatts is all Arnhem. Yeah. Then there will be a 300 megawatt factory in Indonesia, close to Jakarta. And a 1 gigawatt factory is being designed for Australia. So that total production volume of close to 2 gigawatt should be installed within the next 3 years. Those plans are more or less finalized.
By the time he's producing a gigawatt of Powerfoil, Rombot will be capable of powering about 1,000 homes like mine through summer. Before we talk more about his plans to build a factory in Australia, it's worth thinking about what Rombot's expansion plans could do to the unit cost of making Powerfoil. These days, a standard solar panel can produce power for about 20 cents per watt.
We currently aim for a 300 megawatt factory to get to around 10 to 15 cents per watt. And with a 1 gigawatt factory, with also the next step on our roadmap, we are aiming to 5 to 7 cents per watt peak.
Remember how the Australian government said that ultra-low-cost solar was going to be one of the essential technologies that would get us to net zero? In that plan, they challenged the solar panel industry to make panels that could convert 30% of sunlight and do so at a price of 30 cents per watt. People in the industry call this challenge the 30-30-30 policy. So if Rombot can build his 1 gigawatt factory in Australia and achieve the unit costs he's aiming for, the Powerfoil panel would generate about half as much power as the government wants from each panel, but it would cost less than a quarter of the government's price target. For a nation with huge amounts of empty space, that's not a bad deal. Rombot's expansion plans won't come cheap, but that's why it helps to have an Australian billionaire in your corner. More on that after the break. Where were you in the world? What were you doing the first time you met Andrew Forrest?
Actually, I was getting on a helicopter with him, picking him up in one of the airports in the Netherlands to fly him to our factory in Arnhem. Since then, we had a very, at least from my side, a very inspiring relationship.
A helicopter? Yep, that'd be right. In the 2 years since Twiggy Forrest really ramped up his clean energy mission, his life has been like one big adventure. He's been globetrotting in private jets and helicopters and luxury vessels, courting heads of state and business owners. It's all part of a grand plan to get his hands on the world's best clean energy options.
The next time we met, I think, was in an airport in West Central Africa to sign the first agreements between us, which was an unlikely place to sign these kind of agreements as well. But I enjoyed it a lot.
What city was that?
Yaoundé in Cameroon.
Wow. And were you there for some other business, or you simply flew there to sign the deal?
No, well, a sideline of my own activities is nature conservation. So we run in West Africa a couple of projects where we run high-value nature tourism and use the proceeds to finance natural park management. We have an activity not too far from Yaoundé.
In case you don't know, Andrew Forrest is Australia's second richest person with a personal fortune worth more than $30 billion. Most of his wealth is tied up in Fortescue Metals Group, the iron ore mining company that he chairs and wants to turn into a clean energy superpower. A team of Fortescue scouts were studying one of Rombert's other clean energy ventures in the US when they heard about Powerfoyle. The thing that attracted Fortescue and Forrest to Powerfoyle was the same thing that attracted Rombert all those years ago. A firm belief that green hydrogen was going to replace fossil fuels like oil and gas.
If anything would replace fossil fuels, in my idea, it would be hydrogen.
If green hydrogen's going to be the next big thing, then we're going to need huge volumes of low-cost renewables. That's why Rombert believes the low cost of making Powerfoyle is so important. So if we think back to about 2008, what convinced you at that time that hydrogen had a big future?
It wasn't the first time people were thinking about hydrogen as an energy factor. Huh? There had been already an earlier period of popularity. So hydrogen had already been well researched, and obviously it's got a number of compelling properties that makes it quite suitable for energy transport.
So is it fair to say that hydrogen hadn't worked for 100 years or however many years, but the reason in 2008 you had a hunch that it would work really is that the world was starting to get serious about carbon?
Exactly. In 2008, 2009, you had Al Gore. There you really started to see a societal change in attitude.
And so as we stand here now, when you look back, were you early or were you late or were you about the right time?
We were 10 years early, but that gave us the possibility to be well prepared now. And currently, we are active with at least 5 or 6 different hydrogen technologies in the market, and all of them quite popular and successful.
Hydrogen's hoped to be the flammable gas of the future. It's already used to power some modern cars like the Toyota Mirai, and it can be used as a cooking gas in your kitchen. There's heaps of industrial uses, and hydrogen could play the same role in our electricity system as gas-fired power stations do today. To make green hydrogen with zero carbon emissions, you need lots of renewable power to split water into its atomic parts. That's 2 parts hydrogen and 1 part oxygen. If people like Andrew Forrest are right and hydrogen does become a major traded commodity by the end of this decade, then huge volumes of cheap solar power will be needed. In that sense, Rombert's ambition to produce Powerfoyle at super low costs will be a crucial enabler of Fortescue's plan to become a hydrogen giant.
So if there's anything in the hydrogen supply chain that really determines the green hydrogen cost, it's basically the cost of your green electrons. It's your energy cost that really determines what the efficiency of the total chain will be. And if that power is cost-effective, renewable power, you will succeed in having cheap green hydrogen at the other end of your processor.
In October 2021, Fortescue bought a stake in 2 of Rombert's companies, the one that makes Powerfoyle and another company that makes hydrogen electrolyser components. Rombert says Fortescue's stake in the company that makes Powerfoyle is a mix of debt and equity, but it's likely that Fortescue will eventually own half of that company.
The final situation, Fortescue will be around 50%. My shareholding will be probably around 30%, and then 20% for the smaller shareholders.
Having a big cashed-up investor like Fortescue on the register will help Rombert fund the big growth ambitions he has for Powerfoyle. Remember, he wants to build a 1 gigawatt Powerfoil factory in Australia. That's not yet confirmed, but if it goes ahead, it's going to cost close to $300 million. And it will most likely be located in the Queensland city of Gladstone. Why Gladstone? Well, Gladstone's where Fortescue is already building a factory to make the electrolyzers that turn water into hydrogen. Why is the Fortescue partnership going to be good for your business? So obviously it's good for you as an individual, but for your business, what is it that Fortescue brings that you couldn't do?
In our case, it's very simple. Fortescue has this wonderful concept and plan and ambition to produce 50 million ton of green hydrogen in 2030. That coincides completely with what we're trying to contribute to ourselves. So we can now jointly develop technologies that work towards that common goal. And at the same time, pragmatically speaking, they might also be a very big strategic customer for our technology. So it works on all sides.
Gladstone is fast becoming a microcosm of Australia's carbon challenge. It's home to 3 of the big factories that export the fossil fuel we call liquefied natural gas. There's a coal-fired aluminium smelter on the outskirts of town, and a port that services the Queensland coal mining industry. The local voters swung behind Scott Morrison at the 2019 election in the belief that he was a friend of the fossil fuel industries that employed so many people in Gladstone. But things are changing fast. There's signs that Gladstone will also be at the forefront of the clean energy industry. Fortescue and Rombert aren't the only ones planning to inject clean energy jobs into Gladstone. A rival hydrogen developer called H2U also wants to build a hydrogen project in town. Rio Tinto is one of the biggest employers in town at their alumina refinery and aluminium smelter. They've said that they want those 2 assets converted to clean energy by the end of the decade. As one of the biggest power consumers in Australia, that's a powerful signal to the energy industry to get cracking on building renewables in the region around Gladstone. At the 2022 federal election, Scott Morrison's coalition held on to the seat, but only after suffering a 4.9% swing against it. The then Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce told the ABC during the election campaign that he dared not say the word transition around Gladstone. He believes the locals will need to see the clean energy manufacturing jobs for themselves before they believe in them.
We are standing by the jobs they've got, and we are investing billions in towards hydrogen. But we are not going to be saying to people the word transition, because that equals unemployment. Transition to what? There is no other industry here. But we are investing billions of dollars for hydrogen.
And where's that going? What's that billions
what that allows them to do is them to see, workers in Gladstone to see, there is the other job at the same pay and same conditions.
Rombert says he's not chasing a government handout for his Gladstone project. He likes the idea that business people will lead us to net zero, rather than governments.
Green hydrogen is going to be the energy factor of the future. And no, we're not going to ask government for subsidies. We're going to prove it ourselves. And I think that's the mentality. Hopefully will inspire more people to work in the same manner. And so, for instance, what's happening in Australia with Fortescue Future Industries, so our Australian partner, I really appreciate what's happening there. And there you see basically an entrepreneur and company just taking a bet and say, well, I'm going to produce 50 million tons of green hydrogen in a few years' time. And I'll simply make sure that it happens, that I find offtake for it. If there would be 3 or 4 more of these kinds of initiatives, you can be sure that you change our energy landscape.
And if you come down here and you do build a 1 gigawatt factory in Gladstone, can we call you an Aussie?
That would be an honor, yeah. Let's see. We need to prove the 40 megawatt factory early next year. When that has happened, I would very much like to take an invitation up on that.
Thanks for listening to Tech Zero. Join us next week when we chat to a BHP scientist who might have stumbled on a way to build a massive carbon sink in Outback WA. This podcast was hosted and written by me, Peter Kerr. Produced and edited by Lap Fan, with technical production by Cormac Lally. Artwork by Yerevan Delanchian and executively produced by Fiona Buffini. At the Financial Review, we investigate the big stories about markets, business and power. To subscribe to the Financial Review, go to afr.com.au. tech0.com/subscribe. Our subscribers can also sign up for the weekly Carbon Challenge newsletter. If you've got a big green idea that you'd like to talk to Tech Zero about, you can write to us at techzero@afr.com.
The Australian Financial Review.